Hello and welcome to the High Maintenance Hippie podcast. This is your host, Ashley from Ashley Taylor Wellness. On this podcast, we talk about all things beauty, health, wellness, and optimization. Being a high maintenance hippie represents not being boxed in, as I strongly believe that one size does not fit all. I'm a nurse turned coach, and I have learned so much about both conventional and alternative options, and I want to help you expand your options. I'm here to inspire you to learn new ways to improve your quality of life and to take your power back. I'm so excited that you're here, so let's get started. Hello, and welcome back to the High Maintenance Hippie podcast. This is Ashley, and today I want to talk about blood sugar. This is something that is very, very important. I think we really skip over this in the wellness world, in the optimization world, but more and more is coming out about this. When we think about blood sugar, we typically think about diabetes. I saw it all the time in the patients who are hospitalized that I took care of as a nurse. And you'll find this in a lot of different areas, but what conventional or Western medicine considers to be normal, healthy, or appropriate is different than what the functional world or the holistic doctors will say is what they want to see in their ranges. So take it or leave it, but in the conventional world, a lot of people are within normal limits, but they don't actually feel great. And that is true for me and my blood sugar. And an example of this, so some people get things like a fasting blood glucose test done, as well as a hemoglobin A1C every year, every few years, especially if you know that you're at risk for diabetes because of family history or lifestyle or whatever other reason. So my fasting blood sugar has always been where we want it, which is under 100, right? When you wake up, no food, no drink, what is your blood sugar? Water's okay. And typically, we want to see that number in the 80s. And then if it is over 100, it could be because you had a lot of ice cream the night before, or it could be maybe that there's some insulin resistance. You could be on your way to becoming pre-diabetic, but a fasting glucose of 100 to 125 in the conventional world, not a huge cause for concern, but it is something to watch. And then if it's over 125, meaning 126 or above, that could be one of the factors that would lead to a diagnosis of diabetes. I also want to say that there is a difference between type 1 diabetes and type 2. Type 1, which they used to call juvenile diabetes, is something that's typically seen in younger populations because they're not making insulin. So their body will let them know. And type 2 diabetes is often considered the lifestyle version of this condition because it's not that the body isn't making insulin, it's that the body has become resistant to the insulin that is there, so we need more of it. So if you have type 1 diabetes and you are on insulin to save your life, you might need it forever, but that doesn't mean there aren't things you can do to keep your blood sugar stable and minimize the amount of insulin you're using. If you have type 2 diabetes, it is very likely with proper lifestyle that you would be able to discontinue the need for insulin, not on your own. You need to do that with your doctor being on board because it's something that could be very serious if you overdo or you skip the insulin. So I'm not against medications. I'm here to bridge the gap between the Eastern and Western worlds, between the functional and conventional worlds. I think there's a time and a place for both, but I'm all about living my best quality of life, understanding what my body is trying to tell me, and to feel my best. All of these things are very important. I don't just want to live to be old, but I want to have a great quality of life. And balancing blood sugar is something that allows me to feel my best. And I'll say this because my mood is better, my energy is better. And hunger is real. I don't know if you've ever been hangry and you're like, I don't care what I eat, but if I don't eat something, I'm going to lose my mind. We'll call that hunger. That's not happening when I have balanced blood sugar. But that is happening when I have high highs and sharp crashes in my blood sugar. And how would I even know that? So on the back of my arm right here, this is a sensor. It is a LibraLink sensor. And I've tried several different companies, but I love Nutrisense because their app is so cool and very easy to use. I recommend signing up for 1 month of it. That is plenty of data to figure out what's working for your body and what isn't working for your body. And then I make a list of all the meals that are balanced for my blood sugar. I posted a reel a day or two ago, and it showed what I had for breakfast. What I had for breakfast: 3 scrambled eggs, 3/4 of a cup of mashed potatoes, lots of butter, raw grass-fed butter, organic, sour cream. I used 3 tablespoons, about an ounce of raw shredded cheddar, and then Redmond real salt. I applied that liberally. So we've got protein, which are the eggs, fat from the dairy, and carbs from the potato. So all together, I'm hitting all 3 macronutrients: fat, carbs, and protein. When I looked at everything, as far as the macronutrients, which I don't usually do, but just since I was posting about it, I was curious, that had a much higher percentage of fat compared to the other macronutrients. But it's important that we start our day with fat and protein, not carb-heavy meals, and I'll get into why that is. But the blood sugar roller coaster is something that happens when you eat something sweet and then you just crave it. Similar to many drugs like cocaine. Once you pop, you don't stop. And sugar is very much a drug. I'm not anti-sugar. There's a time and a place for it. But I also think that we live in a world with so many processed foods, and we're not really aware about how this affects our body. This is the High Maintenance Hippie podcast, so I do want to look my best. And something that I learned about is glycation. It's a natural process that happens. Think of it like creme brulee and the browning that happens when you heat it up. So when we have a lot of sugar in our blood and it's excess sugar, it's going to increase the rate of glycation, which is going to age us. And another thing as far as aging is that excess processed sugar, I was told to think of it like scissors cutting your collagen. So it's increasing the rate of glycation. It's breaking down our collagen. It's inflammatory. Why are we consuming sugar like this? Well, it's delicious. And the other thing is when our blood sugar spikes and then drops. Once our blood sugar drops, our body is going to release cortisol and adrenaline. And a couple times in the middle of the night, I've actually woken up, and between my Oura Ring and the CGM, I could see the times, and it's almost like my body woke me up because my blood sugar got low. So that is great for my safety because we don't want the blood sugar to get too low, but it wasn't helpful for my sleep. So that's another perk of balancing our blood sugar. Hopefully we can sleep better throughout the night, have more energy, feel better, minimize the rate of glycation, and look and feel our best, among other perks. So there are 7 steps to balancing blood sugar. I'm going to go over those. I learned these from Health Coach Institute. And then I'm also going to share some things that I learned from Glucose Goddess about the order in which we eat and why that's important. So why would we want to avoid what they call the blood sugar roller coaster? I mentioned glycation before, but think about it like this. When your blood sugar spikes, it is going to crash. And the harder it spikes, typically the harder it crashes. And what is bringing that blood sugar up? The sugar in our blood. What's bringing it down? A couple things. One could be insulin, either made by the body, endogenous insulin. It could be insulin that we are injecting if we're prescribed that to bring that level down. Or movement actually burns blood sugar, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. So when we have our blood sugar spike and then it crashes, that's when we will feel often the symptoms like being irritable, jittery, sometimes even nausea, hot sweats, all sorts of things. So for me, if my blood sugar is below 70, or if I have a sharp spike that is followed by a sharp crash, I'm not going to be feeling it. And I've been able to correspond how I'm feeling with the blood sugar by anytime I have a moment where I'm feeling very irritable or hangry, I'll just scan it. I'm like, would you look at that? My blood sugar's 60. So it's pretty cool. Then I had to figure out, how do I structure my meals? Do I need to eat more? Do I need to change up the macronutrients? And this has been so helpful because what works for one person is different than what works for another. And I'm not anti-fruit, but sometimes if we only have fruit, that can really send our blood sugar up higher than a cupcake, which is so wild. So I encourage you to do your own experimenting with it. And I have found this to be so helpful. A lot of people see this as a luxury. In many ways it is. But if you look at it as an investment and learning what foods are going to help stabilize your blood sugar while nourishing you, you're going to have that information for life. And I see it as an investment that will increase my return on that investment over time. So, avoiding the blood sugar roller coaster, why this is important. So, a major way to reduce inflammation in the body is to balance our blood sugar. An overview of the blood sugar roller coaster. So, we eat a simple carb, our body will break it down quickly. The blood sugar will spike. The pancreas is triggered to send out insulin. Too much insulin can be released, and too much sugar is taken out of the bloodstream, and our energy will crash. Then we get stress and inflammation in the body, especially when done often or chronically. So, blood sugar is the concentration of glucose in the blood. And we'll talk about why that's important as well. It's considered a simple sugar and the body's go-to energy source. So let's say you're hangry. You are hungry, you want food, you want it now. Are you going to go for a steak or something that's going to give you quick fuel? 9 out of 10 times, the next time you're very hungry, look to see if what you're looking for is a simple carb. And that's because intuitively the body knows that's going to give me energy much more quickly. I don't have to break that down in the same way that I would if it's a complex carb, a fat, or a protein. So the simple carbs are what the body craves whenever the blood sugar levels are low, but that may not be the best thing. If that's all that we eat, then we can just spike and crash all over again. So we do want to get our blood sugar up quickly once it's low, but we also want to stabilize it with fats and protein. We'll talk about that. So when there's a significant amount of glucose, aka too much sugar, or a sharp decline, too little glucose, it will trigger a significant stress response that is inflammatory to the body. Glucose goes from our bloodstream and is delivered to the cells, but just because it's in the bloodstream, it doesn't necessarily mean that the cells can utilize it. So if you have frequent and or prolonged high blood sugar, this can lead to and exacerbate many chronic health conditions. It's a piece of the puzzle. It's not just one thing, which is how we want to look at it. How is the system as a whole working together? And is blood sugar a piece, even if you don't have diabetes, that could be holding you back unknowingly? So insulin is a hormone that determines our body's ability to utilize blood sugar. Remember, in type 2 diabetes, you produce insulin. The person produces insulin, but their cells are not able to use it. The body is not able to use it properly. So then more is needed to be able to do what the body needs to do with the insulin. When blood sugar is released, the pancreas will release insulin as a response. The insulin will bind to cell receptors, and the cell will allow the glucose to pass into the cell and eventually be converted into energy when everything is working properly. That's ideal. Not always how it works for people, especially if they have insulin resistance. So any excess glucose or blood sugar that we have is going to be stored in the liver and the muscles as something called glycogen. So you can take glycogen and break it down to be used as glucose, but it's got to go through this process called gluconeogenesis. And when the body needs fuel, simple carbs that are in the bloodstream would be ideal, but it can break down glycogen if needed. So what happens is that if all the glycogen stores in the liver and the muscles are full, the body will then store the excess glucose as lipids or fatty acids. But this cannot be converted back to glucose. It has to go through a process of ketogenesis, and that's turning fatty acids back into ketone bodies to be converted into energy. So that's a little bit more work for the body, a little bit more complex. Signs of low blood sugar and just having that reaction. Like I said, I am not a person who has diabetes, and I still have symptoms of low blood sugar from time to time. Brain fog, difficulty concentrating, impatience, irritability, nervousness, heart palpitations, sweating, feeling disoriented, lightheadedness, nausea, fatigue, moodiness, feeling hangry. And then signs of high blood sugar include feeling anxious, increased thirst, headaches. We would call it polyuria, polydipsia, polyphagia in the hospital as well. How do I know that my blood sugar is on what they call the blood sugar roller coaster? Well, I have a CGM, and the one that I'm using is from Nutrisense. I have tried several different companies, different sensors, and I really love Nutrisense because their app is so easy to use. You pay for 1 month, and it comes with 2 sensors. Each sensor lasts 2 weeks. And it's really cool. You just take a picture of your food and it will show you how your body responds 2 hours after. It is so cool. So in doing that, I realized that I would not necessarily spike that high, but I would crash really hard. And it was interfering with my sleep. It was correlated with my moods. And by keeping it within a 30-point window, I feel my best. So as an example, if I wake up and my blood sugar is, we'll say 85, I try not to let it go over 115 for the day. If it does, that's okay. And I'll share some of the steps that can help me to keep it more stable. But I want to make sure that I'm not having a crazy glucose response after a meal. In that case, I would want to review my ratio of macronutrients. Do I need to reduce the amount of carbs that I'm having with this particular meal, increase the fat, increase the protein? Maybe there could be some other things. So it's really cool. One thing that really blew my mind was that a bowl of fruit spiked my blood sugar way more than a cupcake. I couldn't believe it. So does that mean fruit is not healthy? No, it doesn't. But it's just one more thing to think about. And could that fruit be combined with something else, like a nut, that would minimize the effects that it has on our blood sugar by spiking and dropping? So just something to think about. As far as the 7 steps, number 1 is drink more water. And this is important because think about if you're really dehydrated, you're going to have a higher concentration of sugar in the blood. That would just make sense. So drinking more water helps balance our blood sugar by decreasing cravings and increasing energy. Drinking water is important for so many reasons, but it also maintains our body's fluid balance. It carries nutrients to our cells. It flushes toxins and waste out of the cells and just the body in general. Helps support healthy kidneys. It helps keep our mucous membranes, like our eyes, skin, nose, mouth, all of those things functioning well, lubricating and cushioning our joints, regulating our body temperature and metabolism, slowing signs of aging, all of these things. So we want to drink, let's say you're 150 pounds, a general guideline, one size does not fit all, but half of that in ounces. So if you're 150 pounds, 75 ounces. So many people are drinking a gallon a day, but if it does not have enough minerals, and I drink distilled water, by the way, love distilled water. It gets everything out, but you have to remineralize it. Same with reverse osmosis. So make sure that you're not only drinking water, but that it has minerals in it. Very important. You might need a little bit more water if you're very active, if you're living in Arizona in the middle of the summer, or if you have more caffeine or alcohol, might need more water there. And things that can make it easier. If you struggle with water, I really like adding LMNT packets. You could add lemon, lime, water, cucumber. I try to drink most of my water before 11 a.m. Just start my day rather than something like a coffee that's going to affect my taste buds and make me crave more coffee. So I start my day with water. And also know that when you first start to increase the amount of water, you might have to go to the bathroom more. That should level off. So step 1, drink more water for balancing blood sugar. Number 2, ensuring adequate protein intake with meals. Very, very important. I see all sorts of things on the internet. Just because you hear eat a protein-rich breakfast, I'm the type of person that needs to say, how does this work for me? And that's why I love feedback tools like my Oura Ring, like the CGM. But I feel so much better when I have a protein-rich meal versus a carb-heavy meal for breakfast. When I start the day with something sugary, like waffles with syrup as an example, I'm going to be craving sugar all day. That is not the case when I have a protein-rich breakfast. So adequate protein intake with meals is so important. Too much or too little protein can cause intense cravings, but we typically see that with too little. But many health experts believe that we get too little protein with our meals, and everyone's different. You've got to play around and see what works best for you. But I do a ratio of about 30, 30, and 40, meaning 30% fat, 30% protein, 40% carbs, roughly about a third of each on my plate. That's what works for me, different for everybody. How does protein help with blood sugar? It slows down digestion, which is going to prevent the rate at which the blood sugar spikes. So when you just have a simple carb by itself, you're going to spike faster, but when combined with other foods like protein or fat, then that's going to slow it down, and then you will not have such an intense spike. So it slows down the absorption of any carbohydrate-based foods, sugar, combined with it. It lessens the intensity and the frequency of the blood sugar roller coaster. Step 3 is very similar to step 2, ensuring that we have adequate healthy fats in the diet. And no, I do not mean trans fats. Those are no bueno. Anything partially hydrogenated, we want to avoid that as well. The reason why fats are also important is that fats help support the blood sugar and prevent the roller coaster because they are more complex and they take longer to digest. So when we have a simple carb with things that take longer to digest, it is going to minimize the rate at which the blood sugar spikes. So you're still getting all of that nutrition, but we're minimizing the blood sugar roller coaster and spikes. And trans fats, this is a little tangent here, but they are designed by man to increase flavor. And it's a business to make us keep coming back. It's not for our health. It's so that it can be shelf stable. Let me just tell you, if something can sit on a shelf for a year and not decompose whatsoever, I don't know that I want that in my body. You do you. Okay, we want more omega-3s in our diet. There's so much controversy about seed oils and omega-6s. Listen, we need omega-6s. The problem is that we consume way more omega-6s than we do omega-3s, and it's about the ratio of the two. So some people will tell you not to have any omega-6s at all. I don't agree with that. But I think what they're trying to say is that if we make that the goal and increase our omega-3s, we'll be back in a better ratio. But we do need both omega-3s and omega-6s. However, most of us are not getting enough omega-3s. And what is the quality like? Is it already rancid by the time it's gotten to us? So just additional considerations. But for omega-3 in the diet, ALA, alpha linoleic acid, EPA, DHA, also very important. But I do minimize omega-6s in seed oils. I do not use canola oil. I do not use safflower oil, corn oil, peanut oil, soybean, sesame oil. I stick with fats like butter, tallow, olive oil, if it's real olive oil, things like that. Avocado oil, even occasionally. So according to Dr. Andrew Weil, our ancestors ate these omega-3s and omega-6s in a ratio of 1-to-1. However, Chris Kresser, he's a health expert, he estimates that we get about 25 times the omega-6s to omega-3s. So if the ratio is supposed to be 1-to-1, it's 25-to-1. So it's not that omega-6s are bad, we just have way more of them. And like many things that you might learn in the functional medicine world, it's not this is good, this is bad. It's more so in relation to everything else. How does it work? It's about the ratios. And yeah, we don't want more omega-6s than omega-3s. The benefits of having healthy fats in the proper ratio for our body include helping our immune system, our health, our cardiovascular system, central nervous system, normalizing cholesterol. We're so afraid of fat, but we need cholesterol and fat for our brain, but more is not better. As always, there's a middle ground. And the media and even social media, it's very quick to say all good, all bad. And I think there's a lot more nuance to these things. But the quality of food is very important. Even saturated fat. So there's a lot of debate about that. Quality is key always. And saturated fat is found in meats, dairy, coconut oil, fried foods. I avoid fried foods at all costs. For me, it's just not a vice that I choose. But I do consume a good amount of saturated fat. My cholesterol looks great. I feel great. My vessels look great, but it is something to check in with. A big source of low quality oils would be restaurants. So that's something to think about. Many doctors that I look up to say if they were going to skip one thing from a restaurant, it would be any of the condiments. So something to think about. But there are 3 major types of fat: saturated, monounsaturated, and polyunsaturated. So I think there's a time and a place for all 3. PUFAs, they get a bad rap, polyunsaturated fatty acids. The issue with that is that they can become rancid more quickly, more easily, and then it's not so anti-inflammatory. I get that, but we still need them. So the question would be, how can I get the omega-3s that I need in the best quality without it being compromised in some way, becoming rancid? So flax seeds, salmon, mackerel, herring, tuna, trout, those are some examples of polyunsaturated fats, but everyone's different. And just because one food works for one person, somebody else could respond totally different to it. So this is just general education on drinking more water, having adequate protein, adequate healthy fats. Step number 4 for balancing blood sugar is count chemicals, not calories. Think about it like this. If your body is trying to deal with all of these toxins, it's not going to have as much energy for digestion and other bodily processes that it needs to do. So I do not count calories at all. I am looking at what is in this food, and if I can't pronounce it, there's a good chance that my body can't understand what it is either. So foods as close to their original form as they come in nature, because that's what the body knows how to break down. Food quality is so important, and that's one of the first things I would recommend to someone who's on a health journey. 1, sleep, but 2, start switching things out for cleaner versions and or organic. We don't need all of these extra chemicals in our foods. We've got them environmentally. We don't need it in our food. It's up to you if you want to choose it. That's your choice. But for me, it's very, very important, and I've chosen organic food since college. So don't stress yourself out, but do your best to move towards highly processed foods, local, seasonal, organic foods, but just slowly work your way there. Don't try to change everything overnight. It's not sustainable. So if our body and our liver is overwhelmed with toxins from all of this frankenfood and artificial food and chemicals and things like that, it's not going to be able to do its job. And people wonder why I do so many liver cleanses and liver detox, because my body is exposed. All of our bodies are exposed to more toxins than ever before. But we definitely don't want to be overloading it with food that we can get in a cleaner form whenever possible. So some tips for this, for counting chemicals, not calories. One would be choose foods that have fewer ingredients. When you read the ingredients, the first ingredient that you see when it lists them out is what is most present in that food item, and the very last one is least present in that food item. So if it's only got 3 ingredients, great. If it's an orange and it says, well, an orange isn't going to tell you the ingredients, but milk, they make an almond milk. It's literally 3 ingredients. It's almonds, water, and something else. I don't remember off the top of my head. But when you have all of these different ingredients, are they really necessary? Is there a version of that food item you could get without it? So fewer ingredients whenever possible. Keep it organic. I have briefly covered that one. And then phase in to phase out. Don't go throw your whole kitchen pantry away. But what you can do is say, the next time that I am choosing something, I'm going to buy a healthier or a cleaner version of this item. Do not try to change everything overnight. It is so overwhelming. I've been working on this for about 8 years, and I was pretty overwhelmed at first, and now I just one thing at a time, and that becomes something that you master, and then you move on and you just build on that. So take the pressure off yourself and just say, what's one better choice I can make, and over time that'll really add up. And then consistent meal timing. So this is step 5. Typically, we should be able to go 4 to 5 hours between meals. This is different if you're breastfeeding, if you have HPA axis dysfunction or adrenal issues, or you're very burnt out. You might need to be eating more often, which is why I'm going to say one size does not fit all. But typically, we should be able to go about 4 to 5 hours between meals if we have a balanced meal. My CGM tells me how my body is doing in that time. If my blood sugar were crashing, once again, I would tweak the meals or figure out what would be a healthy snack, things like that. So eating sporadically, meaning not really on any sort of schedule, can cause extreme highs and lows in blood sugar levels, which creates stress on the body. We have plenty of stress. We don't need more. Eating only once a day is not recommended when in a state of burnout, especially for women. I think men can get away with eating in a smaller window for time-restricted eating or intermittent fasting. For women, I know this is controversial. You can do whatever you'd like, but I found at first I felt better and then it backfired. And I personally will never go shorter than an 8-hour window of eating. So let's say there are 24 hours in the day. 16-8 is a fast that a lot of people do. They don't eat for 16 hours. They eat in that 8 hours. If you are intermittent fasting, please make sure that you're eating as much food as you would have eaten during that full 24-hour period, just in a more compressed period of time. But I think we get into trouble when we cut out meals, especially as females. If you're going to cut out a meal, I would say not breakfast and not lunch. Those are very important. I would cut out dinner, but I still find that a 12-12 schedule works for me. So if I wake up, I have my first meal at 7 a.m., I'm done with my last meal by 7 p.m. That works beautifully for me. We are all different. So I'm not here to tell you what you should do. I'm just sharing what I've learned and what makes me feel my best. Eating once a day can exacerbate hormonal imbalances, especially in women. And there are situations where intermittent fasting is appropriate. So this is not medical advice. Cancer, epilepsy, that might be appropriate, might not. Not here to tell you. But when we are only eating once a day, it can cause us to be in a reactionary and survival place physiologically, rather than being more healing, repairing, and thriving. Because the body's like, hey, she's not feeding me. So are we okay? Are we in danger? Do I need to hoard these resources? And a lot of people think, oh, if I don't eat as much, I'm going to lose weight. But the body might be holding on for dear life because it doesn't know when you're going to feed it again. And that's a whole other issue that we could talk about on a different podcast. So eating too frequently could also be taxing on the body because it's spending all this time digesting and not having energy for other processes. So that's why we eat our meal, ideally within 15 to 45, no more than 60 minutes. And that time should be spent just on digesting, and then go several hours before your next meal. But if you're grazing every single hour, is it an emotional habit? Is it a blood sugar thing? What's really going on there? So eating too frequently can get in the way of other processes, and it can contribute to insulin resistance, which means your body requires higher levels of insulin to bring the glucose levels down to that physiological balance. That's another thing that you could self-monitor with a CGM and just see how your body is responding in the way that you eat. And when I work with clients, if they decide to get one on their own, I say, hey, don't make any changes. Just see how your body's responding to what you're already doing. And they're like, wow, this is so interesting. And I thought the same too when I did it. Once again, I'm still using one. Proper meal timing can help repair insulin sensitivity. And it is important to find the right amount and balance of macronutrients for you and your body. Different for everybody. I mentioned for me, 30, 30, 40. About 30% fat, 30% protein, 40% carbs. Typically, that's what works best for me, different for everybody. We also want to minimize snacking if we can. If your blood sugar's low or if you truly need a snack, have that snack. But once again, where is that urge to snack coming from? Low blood sugar, true physiological hunger, or is it a form of self-soothing in some way, boredom even? Or there are delicious snacks in the break room. That could be it too. In a circadian lifestyle, one eats after the sun is up and has their last meal before the sun goes down, not eating when it's dark out. That makes sense. But with daylight savings and all the changes that happen, especially in some places it gets dark at like 4 p.m., that might be a little bit difficult for some to navigate. But back in the day, what did our ancestors do? Right? They weren't eating late at night. We would eat during the day, sleep at night. So thinking about how we used to do things and living in harmony with nature as much as we can is helpful. Number 6 is sleep. This is a non-negotiable across the board, but also for balancing blood sugar. And this is important because when we are sleep deprived, our cortisol levels will rise. This mimics the blood sugar roller coaster. When we are sleep deprived, cortisol levels rise, and this mimics the blood sugar roller coaster. And that can have harmful effects that lead to weight gain, especially around the abdomen. That's pretty classic for when we see high levels of cortisol. And insulin resistance, heart attacks, high blood pressure, depression, osteoporosis, decreased immune function, and more. We need to be sleeping. We do not appreciate this. I sure do after working night shift for many years. I thought that measly $4 an hour would be worth it. It was not. It cost me a lot more money than that and time away from work to get my health back. So anyway, very passionate about sleep. So a lack of sleep affects our hormones, and there are two that I want to mention. One is ghrelin, Ghrelin. So think about it like ghrelin, the hunger hormone. That is what tells us that we have an appetite. More ghrelin means more hunger hormone, which means more cravings. And as this hunger hormone acts on the pleasure center of the brain, we're probably going to eat more food. And there is something called leptin. Leptin is what keeps us full. So these hormones are not going to be working properly if we have other hormonal imbalances and or we're not sleeping properly. Very, very important that we are sleeping. I will do a podcast just on sleep. I have a guest coming and we're going to be talking about that. But think about sleep like this. If you go to a car wash and you get in and you get out about 75% of the way, your car's going to be covered in suds. Like, I guess it's cleaner, but there was a whole process it was supposed to go through. Same thing with sleep. It's not, I'll sleep when I'm dead. It's, there are processes that need to happen that maybe we don't know all about consciously, but our bodies need sleep. And a lot of people who are struggling to lose weight, they are not sleeping enough, they are not eating enough, and they're over exercising. And yes, exercise is important. Yes, diet is important. We don't want a calorie, excess, but it's more so about how is the metabolic health for this person and how good is homeostasis. If the body is out of balance, it's not going to be prioritizing something like weight loss. So we have to look at the body as a whole. And that's something that we're missing. We just think calories in, calories out. I won't say that that's wrong. I think there's a lot more to it. Another thing about sleep, as I'm sure you know, when we're tired, we're not like, I'd love to prepare a homemade feast. No, we're like, I don't care. Order the pizza. Do whatever. I'm so tired. I'll eat whatever. We don't want to be making choices out of a place of being hangry when we're sleep deprived. Going to the grocery store hungry, rookie move, right? So when we're hungry, we're more likely to want quick fuel, those simple carbs, sugary, starchy items. We're more likely to make poor food choices, doubt ourselves, feel foggy brained and anxious. And that's a cycle. Once you start eating sugar, it feels great for a little bit, and then we crash, and then we want more, and the cycle continues. So step 7, the last one, is movement. And this is really important and actually a pretty cool hack. So it helps to balance, exercise and movement helps to balance blood sugar by increasing insulin sensitivity. The other thing is, if you go on a walk about 10 to 15 minutes after a meal, you're going to, since that sugar is in your blood, you're going to utilize some of that blood sugar. And you may not need as much insulin to bring it down, which is pretty cool. But what I have found is that if I eat something that has a lot of sugar, I wait an hour and then I go exercise, my body has already released insulin, and so I crash extra hard. So everyone's different, but that was something I observed from my CGM. But yeah, if you're going to have ice cream or a cookie or something like that, go on a walk, finish the cookie, wait about 5, 10, 15 minutes, and then go on a walk and see how you feel. Have you ever noticed little kids will eat a bunch of sugar and then they're like, they have all this energy. And, parents might say, sit down, but maybe they're just intuitively trying to utilize some of that sugar. But we eat sugar and we utilize it in that moment, or it is stored in the liver and muscles as glycogen, right? And it can be converted from glycogen back to glucose, gluconeogenesis. But once those reserves in the liver and the muscles are full with glycogen, it will turn into those fatty acids, and then it has to go through ketogenesis, which is going to take a lot longer for you to get energy from that. But just remember, we need fats, we need protein, we need carbs. They all do something. Anyone that's telling you to eliminate an entire macronutrient group, unless there is a serious medical reason for a short period of time, I would take that with a grain of salt and definitely get a second opinion, just because we need all of those things. They have different functions. So Glucose Goddess, she's gotten a lot of heat. She is a scientist, and it's so interesting how upset it makes people when she shares what she's shared. I am so grateful for the work that she's doing. One thing that she mentioned is the order in which we eat. So to keep it simple, protein, fat, carbs. But if you want to take it a step further, then you could start with fiber. So fiber would be like a salad or broccoli or anything that's going to line the stomach. And the thought process behind that, the theory behind that, is that it is going to slow down the absorption of these carbohydrates because the fiber has coated the belly. So she recommends fiber, then protein, then fat. I'm pretty sure protein and fat are interchangeable there. Then we want to finish with starchy carbs. That's it. So think about it like this. If you were going to have a salad, a meal, and then a dessert, that would go in alignment with what Glucose Goddess is saying here. So when I eat a meal, especially if I'm really hungry, I might reach for the carb first, the potatoes or something like that. And if that's true, I'll check my blood sugar and I'm like, oh, is it really low? So the next time you eat, look at your plate and see what you go for first, especially when you're really hungry. And if it is a simple carb, maybe that's because your body knows, hey, that's going to turn into fuel faster. But we want to start with the things that are going to take a little bit longer to digest so that we can keep our blood sugar more stable. So once again, this has been something that has taken a lot of trial and error as far as figuring out what meals work for me, but it has been one of the most helpful things, like I said, for my energy, my mood, anxiety even. And the CGM, the way that it works, I have my Nutrisense app, and you hit scan, and I just hold it right there. It gives me a reading. Also, I can type in a meal. I pulled up a meal on here, and it'll show me that my blood sugar was a certain level before and what it looks like 2 hours after. And I will say what we consider optimal in the functional medicine and the holistic world is a lot different than what we consider good in the hospital system. But I don't want to compare myself to the sickest of sick. In fact, I only want to compare myself to myself. But the most important thing is how I feel. And I have noticed when I can keep my blood sugar within a 30-point fluctuation throughout the day, I feel incredible. Some people feel their best when it's between a 50-point fluctuation. So if you wake up and your blood sugar is 80, maybe it wouldn't get above 120 that day. Everyone is different. But I just want you to know that we have more options. And the CGM, what's the investment for that? So it's $3.99 for 1 month. I do have a discount code, which is Ashley Taylor Wellness, and that will bring it down to $365, I believe. It saves you $35, so maybe $364. And it comes with 2 sets of sensors. You get dietitian feedback, and they send you an email every week. And it's so great because once you have this information, you will know what foods are serving you, and you can refer back to them. The other thing that's really cool is that if you have moments where you're super irritable and you check and see that your blood sugar is low, great. Now you know that it's not just because you're crazy for no reason. There's a physiological response and your body's trying to get your attention. I truly wish that insurance would cover CGMs for everyone just for a short period of time. I don't think that's going to be happening anytime soon. I think it would help people understand how their body is affected by different foods so they could make better choices and prevent an array of health conditions. Diabetes is so common. Metabolic health is not very good in our country. People are becoming sicker and sicker as time goes on, and this is such a great tool. I'm sure I'm going to get heat from somebody that says, oh, well, must be nice that you can get it. It is nice. And why are the insurance companies not doing the most for people? Is this a Nutrisense problem, or is this an insurance company problem where they're not, in my opinion, looking at, hey, if we gave people access to this, would this prevent future costs and, more importantly, improve their quality of life? And that is a question I can't really get too much further into, but this is something that, in my opinion, has been an incredible investment for how I feel, my health, my numbers look great. And once again, just because my fasting blood sugar and my A1C were ideal, it didn't mean I wasn't all over the place throughout the day. So it's been very helpful. If you ever have any questions, you can email me, Ashley at ashleytaylorwellness, or send me a DM on Instagram, ashleytaylorwellness. And I hope this was helpful for you. So think about those 7 steps for balancing blood sugar. Consider and or talk to your doctor about trying a CGM just for 1 month. And if you do, I absolutely love Nutrisense. My code is Ashley Taylor Wellness. Just make sure to cancel it or it will auto renew for another month. So as soon as you get it, you can cancel it. You can still use it for the rest of the month. But it has been one of the most powerful feedback tools that I've ever used. And I think a lot of people, especially as one example, women dealing with PCOS and cysts and all sorts of issues that are exacerbated by poor blood sugar regulation, I think a lot of conditions would be improved if we were able to see this data. But most people don't see this data until they have diabetes. And at that point, they just take insulin and case closed. And that's fine. If that's what's right for you, that's fine. But if you're the type of person who wants to be as independent as possible and have your best quality of life, it's something I would absolutely explore. So I hope this was helpful, and I would love to hear any thoughts or feedback that you have on this topic. I am a huge Agent Notor fan. You probably know that if you've watched my Instagram stories. And one product that I absolutely love is called Holy Bright. It is their Resurface Glass Face Mask. And this is something that I like to use with a brush. This is the Agent Nature brush that you can get with it. And this mask can be used 2 to 3 times a week for about 30 minutes, or you can do what I do and I leave it on once per week, but I put it on and leave it overnight. Some people call this mask better than Botox. I don't know that I'm going to say it's better than Botox, but it's pretty amazing. My skin is glowing and radiant, and I love how it looks when I use this. And Agent Nature uses the best products. So if this is something you'd like to try, then you can get it at Citrine, and my code ashleytaylorwellness saves 10%. Thank you for listening to the High Maintenance Hippie podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the podcast, rate it, and leave a review, ideally a 5-star review if you loved it. All of this is free of charge and really helps me to be able to run the podcast. If you take a screenshot and tag me, I'll repost you and shout you out on Instagram. So tag Ashley Taylor Wellness and High Maintenance Hippie Podcast. If you have any feedback or guests that you'd like to have, I would love to hear from you so that I'm not just talking at you. I really want to deliver things that are valuable. So send me an email with any feedback, suggestions, or ideas for guests at ashley@ashleytaylorwellness.com. And I will leave you with a disclaimer. Please know that this is not medical advice or replacement for seeking medical care. Everything discussed on this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only. Always consult with your medical provider before making any changes. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.